Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Lizzie and I hope that you are very, very well. Now, Doctor Who is back on our screens and I'm so excited and it's so good. I'm loving this new series. It's just so good. It's so good. I'll admit I was dubious when they said it was going to be one continuous storyline, because one of the best things about Doctor Who is the Monster of the Week format. I love that. Historically, the long storylines haven't always been great. I'm looking at you, entire Moffat era. So I was dubious, but I'm really, really loving it. I think they've got the right balance between the kind of campy monsters and the serious storylines and exploring history. And by doing it as one big arc, then they can have a bit of all of those things in every episode. So, loving it so far. As I was watching it, I was thinking of Doctor Who themed videos that I could do, coming up with recommendation themes. I was trying to think of some kind of prompts or something, and then I thought, I bet someone out there has already made a Doctor Who tag. And I was right, there are 2 already. So the one that I'm doing today, there is a prompt for each of the 14 doctors, so 13 numbered doctors, plus the War Doctor. So without any further ado, let's get into it. Down the vortex we go, into the books. Apologies in advance if I blink even more than usual in this video. I'm not just terrible at fighting weeping angels, I seem to have an eyelash in my eye and I can't get it out, so sorry in advance. For the first Doctor, the prompt is a favourite first book in a series, and I've gone for A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. It's a popular one for a reason. It's such a good book, and it's one of those books, the first one in a series, where it works well as a standalone story, but it sets up the world just so well. A Darker Shade of Magic is a fantasy book, and it's in a world where there are 4 different Londons that all have different levels of magic. So we live in Grey London, where there is no magic, but magic brought from other Londons can work here. The main character, Kel, is from Red London, which is a kind of high fantasy esque city. Then there's White London, which is slowly being corrupted by the level of magic that is there. And then there's Black London, which has dangerous levels of magic. No one can go in or out. And Kel is one of the few people who can pass between Londons, who can jump between Londons. And he is on a mission because a piece of Black London has made its way all the way to Grey London, and he needs to work out why. It's such a good fantasy series. I love it so much. We all do. So of course it was first on this list. For the second Doctor, a favourite sequel. Now I did cheat a little bit for this one because, I mean, it is a sequel, but it's not the second in a series, and that is A Storm of Swords by George R.R. Martin. I do enjoy the Song of Ice and Fire series. I enjoyed some of them more than others, and I love Storm of Swords. Storm of Swords is just so good. So much happens. You've got all the good characters, and then it's just a snooze fest for the next couple of books, if we're being honest. This is, of course, the book series that Game of Thrones is based off, and Storm of Swords is where all the exciting things happen, including, but not limited to, the Red Wedding. So you know why I love it, right? You know why it's the best one. For the third Doctor, it's a favourite trilogy, and I, of course, picked His Dark Materials by Philip Pullman. This is such a good trilogy. It's so good. It's just so good. It's just so good. This starts off as a middle grade fantasy about a girl and her animal companion going up to the north to go and save her lost friend, and ends up with like an inter-universe war with philosophical and pseudo-theological things going on. It's amazing. It blows my mind every single time. It's like science fiction masquerading as fantasy. You know, the purest science fiction and fantasy and steampunk and adventure and philosophy all in one trilogy. And it's just so good. For the fourth Doctor, a book with a colourful cover. So I had a look on my shelves and I struggled, I'm going to be honest, because I mostly read pretty miserable books that have pretty miserable looking covers. But I did pick up this one. off my shelf, Bloody Brilliant Women by Cathy Newman. This is a non-fiction book about women throughout history, and I think it's sort of organised based on their like field. So I think there's like a chapter about engineers and a chapter about like monarchs and political figures, etc. And there's just some really fun colours on this cover. So yeah, I thought I would pick this one. Lots going on, lots of colours for the 4th Doctor. Next up is the 5th Doctor in his very stylish cricket whites. And so the prompt is a book about sports. And I don't really read books about sports. I have very little interest in sports. Although now I'm thinking about it, I have read at least one other book on sports, which I know increases this number by like 50%. It's not a big number. But the books I have chosen are Check Please. I've got volumes 1 and 2 here. I love these books so much. They're a graphic novel series based on a webcomic about Bitty, who is a former figure skater, and Baker, who goes to college and joins an ice hockey team. So you have ice hockey and baking, and you have coming out, and you have found family, and you have wholesome male friendships and supporting each other, and you have mental health, and so much in these glorious, glorious graphic novels, and I love them so much. I love them so much. So yes, these two for a sport book. And I mean, ice hockey is a sport that I actually enjoy watching, which is unlike me. I'm not really a sports person. These books have my complete heart, and I love them so much. For the 6th Doctor, a book featuring a dark villain. Ooh. And for this, I have chosen the Young Elites trilogy by Marie Lu. Whenever I think of a good villain story, this is the one I think of. This is a YA fantasy in a kind of sort of X-Men-esque setup where people have certain powers that kind of manifest when they're in their teen years, and those people who have those powers tend to be shut away and live in small communities where they can support each other. What I love is you're reading it and you think you're reading one book and you think it's going in one direction, and then it turns out you're reading the villain's backstory and the main character is in fact the villain, which was just such a good twist on the usual tropes, the usual fare. So yes, whenever I think of a good villain story, this is always the one that pops into my mind. For the 7th Doctor, it's my favourite adult/dark book. And I wasn't really sure what to pick for this one, because I read a lot of books that would be considered to be dark books, in sort of having dark themes. And I mostly read adult fiction. I wasn't sure if it meant fiction aimed at adults, or books aimed at adults, or adult fiction. I suspect probably the former. But anyway, I decided to choose a book that fulfills both of those and also kind of marked my moving into adult fiction as I got older. And that is Dark Matter by Michelle Paver. Michelle Paver is probably best known for the Chronicles of Ancient Darkness series, the Wolf Brother books, which I loved as a teenager, absolutely loved them. And I remember when this book first came out being like, I need to read it because it's a new book by my favourite author. And I was like 15 and I looked at it and thought, nah, that doesn't look like my sort of thing. And then I read it when I was an adult and I really, really enjoyed it. This is a ghost story, so fulfilling the dark part of the prompt, and it is set in an Arctic exploration in the early 20th century. It's so spooky and haunting, and has such a good sort of character-driven narrative. I just absolutely loved this book when I first read it. Then for the 8th Doctor, a favourite dramatic book. And again, I've gone down an unusual route for this one. Rather than pick a book filled with drama in terms of plot, because again, that's a very broad category, I have picked a book that, yes, has lots of drama in the plot, but is also literally about drama. and that is the Gemma books by Noel Streatfeild. It's so funny, I haven't thought about these books in years, and then I was thinking about what book to do for this prompt, and it all came flooding back to me, and now I might just reread them. Noel Streatfeild is best known as the author of the Ballet Shoes books, and mostly wrote lots of books about children in the performing arts, whether that be children who go to a stage school or children who work and have, are employed in the performing arts. And Gemma is about a child film star who sort of has to come back to earth and normality when she moves in with her cousins who live a very ordinary life. I loved these books when I was a kid so much. I think I read them when I was about 10, 11, 12, which was just a perfect age. Gemma is such an interesting character. She's flawed and she's obnoxious. She's not the kind of perfectly rounded character you often get in things like Noel Streatfeild books. And it's such a good coming of age story. So many just little moments of kind of starting to think about your appearance in a different way as you become a teen and things like that, that were just really spoke to me when I was that age. So yeah, I picked Gemma and the sequels for this prompt. Next up, we have The War Doctor, a book you would rather forget that you have read. Having said earlier on that His Dark Materials was my favourite trilogy, which it is, I stand by that. Some of Philip Pullman's more recent releases have been interesting. And in that vein of thinking, the book I would rather I hadn't read is The Secret Commonwealth by Philip Pullman. So this is the second one in the companion trilogy, The Book of Dust, which he is currently writing, that is set before and after the events of His Dark Materials. So this particular volume is set after His Dark Materials, about 10 years later. And it was a time. It was a time. So first of all, we're undermining so much character development, basically everything. Lyra and Pan now just hate each other seemingly out of nowhere. It didn't seem very well set up or well explored for that matter as to the implications of genuinely not enjoying spending time with the part of your soul that lives outside your body. That just sort of seemed pretty brushed over for a book that's for a series that has been so focused on the details and so fleshed out. That kind of came out of nowhere. And Lyra is an adult in this one, and Philip Pullman made sure we knew it, with basically every man just being like, I'm in love with her, and taking every opportunity to describe her body, and every opportunity for men in the book to describe her body, or there was a very gratuitous scene towards the end which I neither enjoyed nor felt the need for. And after all that, nothing happened. Nothing happened. It was 600 pages long, which is ridiculous because the font was huge, and then nothing happened. I will probably read the last one, but I wish I could forget The Secret Commonwealth and then read a better version of it. Next up is The Ninth Doctor, The Comeback Kid, and the prompt is a book that made you pick up a series or genre again. So I've gone for The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin. I'm gonna be honest, I read some pretty rubbish sci-fi at the start of this year, and I was like, do I even like sci-fi? Do I? And then I read this, and I was like, yes, I do. Yes, I do like sci-fi. I just like the weird abstract sci-fi rather than space operas. So yes, this one reignited my interest in science fiction. I say that like I've acted on it. I kind of haven't really read much sci-fi since I read this, but I want to, and that's what the prompt is for. Number 10, David Tennant, my favourite Doctor. of course. And of course, the prompt is your favourite hyped book. I thought a lot about this one. It was a toss-up between two books, and I decided to go for Red, White and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. This is a very hyped book. It's a very hyped book. You've probably come across it before. I've mentioned it on my channel before. And this is a contemporary romance between Prince of England and the first son of the United States. Say no more. It's glorious. I love it. Everyone loves it. That's why it's a very hyped book. For the 11th Doctor, favourite children's or middle grade book. And for this one, I've gone for a book that I would be happy to read over and over again for my entire life. And that is The Amazing Maurice and His Educated Rodents by Terry Pratchett. This is one of the Discworld books. I don't think it's the first Discworld book I read. I think that was The Wee Free Men. But this is the one that really got me into the series. I think I was too young when I read The Wee Free Men to really kind of read any of the other books. But reading The Amazing Maurice, I was like, I'm here, give me more. And luckily, there were many more. Discworld is a fantasy series of a flat, round, circular world, shaped like a disc, that sits on the back of 4 elephants on the back of a giant turtle swimming through space. And stories work a little differently on Discworld in that stories want to play themselves out. The way that humans want things to end often happens. And The Amazing Maurice is a talking cat, and he has a band of talking rats, and they go from town to town, infesting each town. And they also have a stupid looking kid with a pipe in their group who then agrees to play his pipe, and all the rats follow him out of town. He collects the money and they split the cash between them. So they've got a con, they've got a scam going on. But one day they get to a town where things are not quite as simple as that, and there is something much darker at play. I really want to reread The Amazing Maurice. I read it so many times growing up, but I haven't read it in a few years, and they've just released the first pictures of the film they're making of it, and it looks so good. So I might reread it or listen to the audiobook over the next few weeks, because I'm ready to get back on that hype train. Next we have the 12th Doctor, and the prompt for this one, most anticipated new release. And for this one, I'm going with Husband Material by Alexis Hall. I loved Boyfriend Material, it was so good. I loved Something Fabulous, which is his Regency romance that's coming out. I will love Husband Material. I feel like Alexis Hall, he writes hilarious books. They're witty and funny, but also really heartwarming and full of soul. What I love the most in his books is his depiction of the wider LGBTQ community, and in the way that it's just so funny. It's so funny because it's so true to life. I'm still laughing about the James Royce Royces. So in the first book, there are these two characters called James Royce Royce because they're both called James Royce, and then they married each other, so they're both James Royce Royce. And honestly, I know many people in a similar situation. So things like that just add that extra finishing touch to his books. And I'm so excited for Husband Material and to find out what Luke and Oliver get up to next. Hello, my battery died, but I'm on my front camera on my phone. Apologies if the quality isn't great. And the zoom has changed, everything has changed, but we're here, we're back. Okay, final Doctor, 13th Doctor, Jodie Whittaker. And the prompt is Found Family. And you didn't think there'd just be one Discworld book on this list, did you? Of course there is more than one. And for this one, I'm choosing Monstrous Regiment. So a bit like The Amazing Maurice, this one plays on tropes and stories that we already are familiar with. So the main character, Polly, she is a young woman who is disguising herself as a man to go to war. And the story kind of plays off the fact that if we are being told all these stories about women who dress up as men to go to war, surely by this point, a large proportion of the army is women dressed up as men to go to war. And maybe they would just be able to end the war quickly if they could stop dressing as men and just sort things out among themselves. It's a great book. It's hilarious. It's very wittily observant on gender roles, but also really explores ideas of gender and sexuality, including having some characters who do just dress as a man to go to war, some characters who it's not really said, but you get the sense that they identify as gender fluid or as non-binary or somewhere. They don't, you know, fit into a female or male box. You get some characters who are quite happy to live life as a man, even though they've been assigned female at birth, and that they've, you know, been hiding for years and years and years. So, again, just such a fantastic book, one of my favourites, one that I really want to reread soon. I think I've got the audiobook, so that might be an audio reread for me on that one. So yes, I'm going to pick that one for the Found Family for the 13th Doctor. Thank you very much for joining me on this Doctor Who journey through the vortex of time. Let me know which books you would have picked for these prompts, and let me know how much you're loving Doctor Who Flux, because it's so good. It's so good. It's so good. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave it a like, a comment, subscribe, all those things, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.